Have you ever thought that a world made entirely of pink, dolls, and zero real conflict could actually become serious materials for international law? In 2023, Greta Gerwig's Barbie became a global phenomenon. It follows a doll living in her own world, Barbieland, before she is forced to cross over into the real world and confront an existential crisis. But underneath the comedy and the color, there is a question almost nobody asks. If Barbieland actually existed, could it be called a state? And could it apply to join the United Nations? The first issue is whether Barbieland actually qualifies as a state. Under the 1933 Montevideo Convention, a state needs four things. 1. A permanent population. 2. A defined territory. 3. A government. And the last one is the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Barbieland checks the first two fairly easily. There is a large stable population. Barbies of every profession, the Kens, Allen, and the discontinued dolls, all living and governing entirely within Barbieland. Its territory is a heart-shaped landmass, completely separate from the real world, connected only through a rare, unstable portal. Barbieland also has a functioning government, a president, a Supreme Court, and an implied legislature arguably more organized than several real-world microstates. With the fourth criterion, the capacity to enter into relation with other states, is where it falls apart. Barbieland has no history of diplomatic contact. Its only interaction with the outside world runs through metal, a private corporation, not a government one. And under international law, that is not the same as the capacity to conduct foreign relations. The second issue is Kenna's coup and whether it was even legal. After discovering patriarchy in the real world, Ken returns and within days replaces the entire government with a new president, a new Supreme Court, and a special election to rewrite the constitution. Ken never picks up a weapon. He uses something that looks like a constitutional process, an election. That makes it closer to a self-coup or autogol than a classic coup d'etat because the form of law is preserved even as the substance of representative government is destroyed. But the Barbies who go along with it have been brainwashed. Their consent is not free will, it is manipulation. Raising the same concerns international law raises about wars or puppet governments. The kind of questions that denial arbitration between Great Britain and Costa Rica dealt with in 1923. When the constitution is restored, it happens through the same procedure Ken tried to hijack. An actual vote once the Barbies are de-brainwashed. That may be the strongest evidence in the whole film that Barbieland has genuine constitutional machinery, not just power wearing an institutional costume. The third issue, and the one that matters most for understanding real-world statehood disputes, is the difference between the jure and the facto statehood. The jure means an entity is legally recognized as a state whether by satisfying the formal criteria under international law or through recognition by other states. De facto means an entity functions as a state in practice, exercising effective control over territory and populations, and whether or not the rest of the world acknowledges it. Barbieland is a textbook case of de facto without the jure. It governs itself, settles its own disputes, and elects its own leaders entirely on its own terms, but it has never been recognized by a single outside government, and it has never once appeared in the world of Article 4 of the UN Charter. The split is not unique to fiction. Western Sahara's Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic exercises limited effective control and is recognized by dozens of African Union members. yet remains largely unrecognized overall and partly occupied by Morocco, a territory caught between the jure claims and de facto reality. Same goes for Palestine. Over 130 UN member states recognize Palestine de jure, and it holds observer state status at the UN. But its de facto control over its claimed territory remains fragmented and contested, limited by occupation, blockade, and divided administration. Barbieland sits closest to Somaliland or Taiwan in this framework, strong de facto internal sovereignty but almost no de jure recognition. That is exactly why satisfying the Montevideo criteria on paper is never enough by itself to guarantee a seat at the table. Even if Barbieland is treated as a state, statehood and UN memberships are still two different questions. Article 4 of the UN Charter says membership is open to peace-loving states that accept the Charter's obligations and are, in the organization's judgment, able and willing to carry them out. Admissions itself is a two-step political process. A recommendation from the Security Council, then a vote in the General Assembly, which means any of one of the 5 permanent members can block an otherwise qualified applicant. The International Court of Justice said in its 1948 advisory opinion that these Article 4 criteria are the only lawful grounds a member can rely on when voting. In practice, though, admissions has never been purely a legal question. It is a political one too, as Palestine's repeated, still unresolved applications keep showing us. Barbie was made as a comedy, but almost by accident, it turned into a near-perfect case study for teaching the core concept of public international law, the Montevideo Convention, governmental legitimacy, and the gap between the jure and de facto. Out of the 4 Montevideo criteria, Barbieland satisfied 3 fairly convincingly: population, territory, and government. And its government is arguably better organized than several real-world microstates. But it fails almost entirely on the 4th, the capacity to enter into relations with other states, because of an isolation from the real world that is close to absolute. That leaves us with a bigger question. Is it enough for an entity to factually meet the criteria of statehood? Or does recognition by other states remain the final word on its legal existence? And if Barbieland, with a government this well organized, still struggle to be accepted into the international system, what does that say about real entities facing the same gap between the jure and de facto, such as Western Sahara, Kurdistan, Palestine, Somaliland, or Taiwan? Because in the end, statehood is not just about what an entity has within its own borders. It is also about whether the world outside chooses to acknowledge it or chooses to look away.